Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 132 of The Casual Author. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, as I record this. And today I'm talking to Kelly Allegretti about catharsis in writing and disability representation. We talk a little bit about the tragedy of the passing of a family member and how writing had helped her to cope with it and process those feelings. We also talk about representation for certain disabilities in writing, which can be overlooked by a lot of people, particularly like myself, who does not experience that on the daily. So I think you really enjoy the conversation. Kelly is a very positive, upbeat person, and I found that our conversation was very enlightening. So definitely want to stick around for that conversation. Of course, that it does not have any video. I always give the person I'm talking to the preference of whether or not they want to have video. So just keep in mind that it is audio only for this episode, which isn't a problem. I think that's great. So, wow, this past week, my life has taken an interesting turn. My wife and I were just reflecting on our situation and the decisions we've made and wondering, are we up for the challenge? So far, we've been doing the best that we can, but sleep has been very little. Uh, and there's just a lot going on. So let's talk about what that looks like. Before we get into those updates, I do want to remind you that I love to hear where you're listening. I want to hear where you're from and where you like to listen, what you like to do while you're listening. So send pictures to me, send me emails. You can message me on any of the social media platforms. You can find me at author Dan Kenner or the Casual Author. I've got different profiles for each of those, and or email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com. Let me know where you're listening. And of course, if you'd like to support the show, you get an extra Q&A monthly episode where I talk about questions that I get asked about the homestead, about my family, about my writing process, about things that I've learned about independent publishing over the years. So definitely feel free to submit those. And the Patreon's just a couple dollars a month, the equivalent of a cup of coffee or, maybe a little snack if that's something that you want to consider. But yeah, I appreciate any support you have for the show. I do this for you and for myself just to connect other authors and help people find people to relate to and get the help that they need to in their authoring. So that being said, let's dive into the updates. So in terms of homestead updates this week, the reason I said, oh boy, is because our cow Ginger had her baby last week. So I want to say it was Wednesday, possibly Thursday of last week. It's wild because it feels like it's been forever. So she had her baby. It's a little baby boy. We've named him Mac. He's adorable. If you want to see pictures, definitely join my email list at dankenner.com. I'll be sending out some pictures of Mac and Ginger. So what that means, when she has her baby, first off, everything was fine with the birth. We weren't out there for her. She did it on her own. He was there on the ground when I went out to check on her at night. But we had to figure out how to feed him. And baby, it depends. Naturally, they often will figure out how to nurse themselves, but he struggled. He could not figure it out. We tried to help him. He was just resistant. And the thing that's different with cow babies versus goat babies is goat babies they're teeny. They're very, very small. And so you can help them very easily by, getting their mouth on their mom's udder and helping them suck. He was strong. He was not doing it. He was not cool with it. So it was fine. We're planning on pulling him and bottle feeding him anyway. So we ended up just milking out some colostrum. That's the kind of yellowy, sticky stuff that comes before their milk comes in. Human milk is the same way. Pretty much any animal has colostrum first for a little while. So we had to figure out how to bottle feed him, and it was a struggle. He fought it, not because I don't think they fight it because they don't want food. It's because they have to understand what they need to do to eat. So I had to straddle him and kind of force him to take the bottle. He's fine now, but the biggest thing is cows come in milk really fast and hard. So pretty much the moment he was born, we committed ourselves to milking her twice a day. So and it's an endeavor. So getting her, we didn't have as much time to train her to our stanchion as we hoped because he came pretty fast. So training her to come out of the pen, go into the stand where her head can get locked in, giving her treats. Um, And then milking her, it's a process because she has about 5 to 6 gallons of milk every single day. Try to put that in perspective. 6 gallons of milk every single day it's a lot of milk just from one cow. So the process itself is tricky because she's also getting used to it and she's being a little bit of a brat, for lack of a better term. When she's unhappy with us, she will poop on the stand. And so we have to scramble to pull the milking bucket away before it splatters everywhere or try to catch it. And if she pees, we have to catch that or else it'll get in the milk. And so we're trying to train her to behave because she's been milked before, but we're new owners. She has to get used to us. We have to get used to her. And, we're trying to be as patient as we can with her. But tell you what, trying to catch that is it's not fun. I mean, I don't need to give you a mental image of what it's like. So twice a day, it takes about an hour to milk her out. That's taking into consideration walking out there, milking her, going in, storing the milk, cleaning everything. The whole process takes about an hour each time. So we're talking about 2 hours a day. Um, that we've now committed to this cow, and that's fine. Our kids have been great. They've been patient. They come out with us. They're involved in the process, but our time has shrunk quite a bit. I mean, where we were only spending 45 minutes on chores in the morning and that's it. I go out and get eggs in the afternoon. It's not a big deal. Now we've got this 2 hour commitment on top of that for this cow who's giving us trouble and grief. So I'm not talking about it in a negative way. We've made this decision and we're trying to figure it out. And it's actually overall a positive experience. But I tell you what, we were not expecting it. The reason it's feeling a little bit more overwhelming is unfortunately, despite it being the middle of summer, our son managed to get a cold, our brand new newborn baby son, Owen. So it's it's hard, when a newborn is so stuffy that he can't breathe, he can't even nurse very well. He's just not sleeping well at night. He was sleeping great until he got a cold, and now he can't breathe. And so you have to suck his nose out. He can't blow his nose. I haven't been getting a lot of sleep. So it's been an interesting last few days. He came down with a cold about the same time the cow had her baby. That is not even to say that it's just him. A couple of our other kids also got sick. So there's just sickness around. Our cow is giving tons of milk every day. We're just trying to keep everything stable with the goats. Oh, I failed to mention. Oh my word, what is my life? We also got the shipment of our meat chickens, which is 28 meat chicks in the mail, the 2 days after she had her baby. So now not only do we have the cow milking to take care of and our children being sick and the baby being sick, we now have 3 sets of chickens that we're feeding and managing all together. So you can imagine things are just chaotic, right? Everything, it's almost like when it rains, it pours type of situation. Only in this case, it's not negative. These were decisions we made. I just don't think we expected them all to hit right in the same period of time. And so this past week has been kind of wild. That is part of why I'm recording this podcast a day late. You may see that it has been published a little bit later than usual, just because transparently it slipped my mind. We got in from milking late last night, and I thought, oh boy, I didn't record my podcast for today. So it's just one of those things, we're giving ourselves some grace. We're trying to be patient as we figure out how to manage everything. But hopefully, as Owen gets better, our baby gets better, he's not sick anymore, then maybe things will slide into a more natural state, as well as we figure out how to milk Ginger without her being a brat and pooping all over us and everything. I think we'll get to that point. This morning, was actually pretty well behaved. There's a little bit of a kerfuffle, but it wasn't as bad as it has been in the past. So, crossing our fingers for better days and more sleep and less frustration. But that being said, I will say that my leading into author progress, because of all of these things happening, my writing has taken a little bit of a back burner, and I'm okay with it because, I can't do everything all the time. I have written a little bit. I'm nearly done with the short story that I'm writing. So I talked a little bit last week about it. It's kind of like a sci-fi mystery short story. Never done a mystery before. I've done sci-fi before. It's been an interesting experience, but I'm having a blast with it. So I'm thinking like future years, very, very far future, 300, 400 years into the future, technology has grown crazily, and it's a mystery as well. So kind of like a murder mystery short story. But yeah, I haven't been able to write it too much recently. Dragon Blooded is set to return to me, I want to say next week, or possibly the week after, at which point I will be formatting and sending out to ARC readers. So this week it'll be about communicating with the ARC readers and saying, hey, just a heads up, it's coming soon. Here's what you can expect. Here's when it will be published. Here's when I hope you'll be able to read it and review it if possible. Obviously, I can't expect everybody to do it. But yeah, it'll be good to have Dragon Blooded out of the way. Not that it's in the way per se, but it's just the finality of it to write something off and finish it. Um, and once I finish the short story, I'll set it aside. I'm not giving myself a lot of time. Normally, I have the short story written by now. I'll let it sit for maybe a week or two before I go back and edit it in preparation for submitting it at the end of this quarter. And then it's starting all over again. And then it's another quarter and we have another short story. So it's just say there's no rest for the wicked, right? No, just kidding. Not wicked. I'm just being silly. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other progress on the authoring. Not so much. Mainly that's where I am today. I've been tinkering with the covers of the latter 5 books of the Hidden Heritage series, which Dragon Blooded is the first book. There's still a lot that goes into that, but I'm trying to enjoy the process and looking forward to getting that book out to you. If, of course, you'd like to read any of these books beforehand, you can read kind of the early release chapters on my Ream. If you're interested, I mean, I understand that's a niche thing, but I do post early chapters of all the books I'm writing and short stories that I'm writing on reamstories.com/Dan Kenner, I believe is what it is. So I'll put a link in the show notes as well, if that's something you are interested in. But I don't believe there are any other updates for this week. I'm not sure I can afford any more updates this week. So, oh, the one thing I failed to mention, sorry, in on top of all this, is that I am back at work. So my paternity leave officially ended last Friday. So yesterday, Monday, was my first day back at work, and it was good. I mean, for the most part, getting back to full-time work after not working for 4 weeks is a little bit jarring. Not in a negative way, just there's a lot to take into consideration, all the build-up. And on top of that, I, I have put in my 2 weeks notice at this job. I'm starting a new job. So as I said before, when it rains. Um, so 2 weeks from now, I'll be starting a completely new job, seeing how that goes, trying to get into the swing of a completely new gig on top of everything. So pray for me is all I'll say. It's good. We're having a good time, having a blast. So in any case, I believe now that is all of the updates for this week. So we can go ahead and shift to the interview portion with Kelly. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm really excited to learn more about you and what you're working on. Before we get into all that fun stuff, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So I just started writing really in last September. Um, my dad passed away in July,
Oh,
and we both shared a love of literature and everything like that. And we had always talked about writing a book. And so I don't know, when he passed away, I kind of just thought like maybe it was a great time to actually do it.
hmm
Um, so I was just like, I'll give it a try kind of thing.
I,
Um, so yeah.
I think that is very interesting. That's a very hard time. I'm sorry to hear that. Did you find that the writing was a cathartic experience for you after that tragedy?
Yeah, definitely like the father in the story is a lot like my own. And um, it gave me a chance to think about him in a different way when I was writing about it. And I guess I just felt like it was a good way for me as far as grieving. Um, And at the time, I had an infant, so she would wake me up early in the morning anyway, and then I would just be up. So it kind of gave me like, okay, this is something productive to do during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's amazing. And kudos to you having a new baby and having the mindset to write. That's challenging. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like a good time for me to do it, I guess.
Yeah,
So you got to find the time to write, I figured.
it's
So.
true. I like to think of it as, life is never likely to move out of the way so that you have time to write. It really is inserting it where you can. Sounds like you had that similar experience.
Yeah, definitely. You just have to make the time for it. So
Yeah, that's very cool. And some days are better than the others.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So
You gotta
yes.
give yourself some grace about it.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't make it this, but yeah.
Absolutely. So your book is the San Francisco Connection. Where did you get your inspiration for this story specifically?
So, in the news, a lot of stories were about, you know, some of the crime that we had in San Francisco, and you know, people kept saying there was like um, a spiral, and the city was terrible and things like that. And as a local, I could see that there are problems, but also, and the city is just so beautiful, that I also wanted to somehow capture both. So I wanted to capture, like, yeah, there's corruption and there's issues going on, but there's also still so much great things about the city. And so in my book, I wanted to kind of have both, to for people to see both. Um, so I guess that was kind of my inspiration.
I mean, that's very cool because that you even had the mindset for that to display. I mean, because isn't this a crime book?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
I mean, I think it's great to have that focus of, showing the good things and the positive things in the midst of this tragedy in your book, this
Right.
crime.
Yeah.
I think that's it's a really cool perspective to have. Now, you mentioned before that you love true crime. Is that right?
Yes, I do. I love true crime.
So what
Um,
fascinates you about it?
I really like, well, I like the detective aspect of it, so I like hearing about, how they figured out, um, how they solved the case, which I guess kind of was another reason I liked writing mysteries, because I like putting the clues together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, so yeah, I think that's something that interests me about true crime, and it's also a psychological aspect. I think it, as a I just have a hard time understanding why someone would do some of the terrible things that they do. So I kind of like to hear about their backgrounds or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I never thought about it that way. True crime has always been one of those things where I have to admit it does fascinate me a little bit, but it also freaks me out
Yeah.
transparently. Because, when you're watching those crime shows, or it's easier to look at that and say, oh, this is just fiction, right? This doesn't happen. But when you're listening to these true crimes, like, oh, this is not to say those crime shows aren't real. I mean, things like that do happen, but when you realize how real some people's minds are and situations,
Yeah.
you realize it's not that I feel unsafe, but you wonder how safe is this world out there? There's lots of interesting people out there. Did you find yourself
Right.
being weirded out by that or not so much?
No, I mean, I guess there is some aspect of like, oh, you don't know who you might run into that, might be dangerous, but at the same time, I mean, really, like, the serial killers and that kind of thing, there's not that many of them if you look at the entire
That's true.
population.
That's fair.
So, I mean, it's not like we're running across them all the time. Though I did have a friend who, like, her mom lived in two apartment buildings where serial killers lived. So I thought that was
Really?
weird. So
How?
maybe some people have more proximity than others, but
I mean, I live in Little Podunk, Idaho Falls, so it's it's less likely here than in the Bay Area or in some of these other more populated places. Still,
yeah, yeah, she lived in Washington, D.C., so maybe I don't know. But
I can definitely see that. Do you find that listening to true crime helps you have more stories? Like, does it help you be more creative as you're thinking of future stories?
yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, maybe not so much for the crime itself. So
Sure.
I don't necessarily want to take, like, from um you know something like a popular true crime story or anything like
Sure.
that. but especially in the way that they like figure out the like in the way that they solve the crime, like use kind of like the way the detectives figure it out in my book as well. Or also, sometimes there's like huge blunders that you wouldn't think that would actually be true. I was listening to one podcast and they took the prisoner, like they let him go Christmas shopping.
Oh,
And then he, of course, he escaped. I'm like, why would you do that? It just seemed so weird. So,
that
and it's something you like wouldn't even believe. You're like, they wouldn't do that. They did. So
I mean
it's
that's
just
a
stuff like that.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. And yeah, definitely drawing inspiration is far different from copying, and I doubt you're doing that. I don't think many authors do that. There's this constant fear that people have of copying or borrowing work of something or someone else, and I don't think that happens as often as people think. If you're not
Yeah,
intentionally copying something, then you're probably not. There's very different drawing the inspiration. But I would think
yeah,
that
yeah, no, totally.
the psychological aspects of these true crime surely lend a lot to you being able to write your story.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I like to think about like, the person who committed the crime, like their background, like, and then, build that into my own characters, like to make, I mean, because um it's not a dichotomy, right? Someone's not good or bad. They're just complicated, kind of.
Hmm.
So,
No, that's a very interesting point, and I think it's a true perspective to have, and it helps your characters be more believable, right? Um, when they do have these backgrounds. Actually, so that leads me to my next question. I'm curious, do you plot out your stories beforehand? Do you know who the villain, that's not the right the I guess perp is before you write it, or do you discover it as you go?
I've been telling myself I should plot out the story.
Oh,
Like I'm halfway through working on a new book, and I'm like, I really should have plotted this out, but I'm kind of like, I get the idea and then I just kind of run with it. And then halfway through, I'm like, okay, let's make sure that all the characters' names are the same all the
oh
way
yeah.
through and that kind of thing. Um, so could have been helpful to plot it, but I'm kind of a seat of your pants writer, I guess. So,
Well, and I don't think
um,
there's anything wrong with that. Agatha Christie was as well. She was a
oh,
discovery
really? I
writer. Yeah.
didn't know.
She was known to have said that she didn't know who the true person was, the guilty person was until the end of her book, and she was constantly surprised while she was writing her own books.
That's
So,
funny. Yeah, I think sometimes like you have an idea and the character like gives you a new idea and it goes in a different direction than you thought it would. And so
and it
um
can be very effective.
yeah.
So don't feel sheepish about that. It's working and you like it. So just
Yeah, no, I do like it. But it causes a little bit more editing, I think, in the end, because you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense because you wrote it at the beginning.
Absolutely. Discovery writers do have to edit probably a lot more than plotters, but that doesn't bother me. Does that work for you? Do you enjoy that part of it or not as
No,
much?
I do. I think the first draft for me is just like the story, and then the
Mhm.
second draft I really get to like fix all the details and kind of like add more depth and that kind of thing. So, and I mean, somebody once said what the best writing is rewriting, so can't be afraid of editing.
I won't disagree with that person because I believe it's true. I just don't like editing. So it's ironic considering how heavy of a pantser I am discovery writer.
Yeah.
But I recognize editing is important and I will always do it, even if I have to pull my teeth out to do it.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, right?
It is. I'm not going to publish something super messy. So I'll just
Right.
buck up and do it. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's really cool. So do you have plans for so this the book that you publish, I believe is part of a series or it will be part of the series, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I'm working on the second book now. And then I also am working on a romance book. I don't know why. I just was like, kind of want to give it a try. Um, so I'm like about halfway through with that first draft. So I'm kind of halfway through both first drafts. Um,
Yeah. I know
yeah.
why. It's because you're an author and that's just what we do. You get you get an idea for a story. It's just like, well, why not? Why not write this? But
Yeah, I just want to
yeah, what's it like
give it
writing
a try.
a romance and crime stories, mystery stories concurrently? Is that strange?
Yeah, I don't understand why I decided to do both, but I guess some days I'm like, oh, I'm more interested in finishing the mystery, and some days I'm more interested in finishing the romance. So it kind of helps both come along.
Hmm.
Um, and in both my books, even though they're mysteries, there's a little bit of romance in them. So it wasn't completely like um they're not completely separate. I don't think for me, I think like well, romance is a part of life, so
Hmm.
it's kind of like gonna come up in any type of story. So it's not. It wasn't there to me. They weren't completely separate, I guess.
Well, they're not, yeah, for sure. It's just natural. Human emotion is complicated. Like I said, humans are complicated. So to have a story even as potentially intense as a mystery, it's totally understandable for there to be some romance and feelings in that. I mean, that's what crime shows do. Think about any crime show you've watched, and there's going to be romance in it. So
Yeah.
it's pretty common. So, what advice do you have for someone who is interested? Maybe they've never written in the genre of mystery, or maybe they're just a new author. What advice do you have for them getting into writing mystery?
Yeah. So I think it's just like, reading different types of books. That's helped me a lot. Like it's just, I'm always constantly reading and since it just gives me like new ideas and new inspiration, that kind of thing. And it's also just like don't be afraid of it because I know
Hmm.
um before I started I was like, oh, I can't really do this. It's like for other people, it's not for me kind of thing. Um, but I think if you just start and you kind of like write a little bit every day, I saw that as some advice somewhere and it really helped me a lot. Is not to like necessarily have like, okay, I have to write 3,000 words today, but like, just write something. You'll eventually get it done, that kind of thing. So, and there's a lot of groups out there now, like Facebook groups and stuff like that, where you can find a lot of inspiration and motivation. So,
Oh,
encourage people to join those.
I think that's awesome. Did you join those groups prior to writing, or did you just seek those groups while you were in the middle of your book?
Yeah, so I'm a virtual assistant. Uh, so I actually was working for an author, and she's like, "Oh, join this Facebook group because it has a lot of marketing ideas and stuff like that." And when I joined, it kind of started giving me inspiration to write myself, just by seeing like everyone's like posts and how excited they were about their books that they published. And I hadn't even really realized you could just publish on your own.
Mhm.
So, yeah, those groups gave me the inspiration, really.
Okay, I have so many questions now. I mean, I had so many questions before, but so you're a virtual assistant. You still are for another author, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Very
yes, I
cool.
am. He's a
So,
historical fiction author.
oh, interesting. Okay, very, very cool. So, how has that been helpful being a virtual assistant for another author in helping you build your own author business?
Well, I guess, I always have marketing ideas for him, like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. Then I'm always like, why aren't you doing this for yourself? Because you could totally do that,
Right.
you know? And so, um, in like researching different ways to help him, like market his book, gives me a lot of like ideas of my own, I guess. So that helps. And then just kind of, I also work for a publishing company, so I kind of am have all things book going lately, between the author and the publishing company and that kind of thing. So I'm always thinking about books in one way or another lately.
That is wicked cool. That's very cool. So you embody being in publishing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So
So
when I
it's
asked
it's
how
not,
long you've been in publishing, you've been in it for a while, just not publishing
yeah,
yourself.
just not posting myself. So I
Very
guess it
cool.
was inevitable in a way.
That's so cool, though. Do you like being a virtual assistant? Is it the type of work you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I really love it. I mean, because I get to work for a lot of different people. So every day is kind of new. And also, there's an aspect of what's remote, so it can move around as needed. Um, and I get to kind of set my own schedule, so it does make writing a little bit easier.
Mhm.
Um, as long as I get whatever work that I have done, I can write after that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And if something you enjoy, I realize that's kind of a challenging question to answer because you couldn't really say no to you like doing it. Just on the off chance. Not that you would say that, but what is the most challenging part of because there's a lot of authors who they can't afford virtual assistants, like myself, for example. I it's not in the cards currently for me to have a virtual assistant. I would love to, but what is the most challenging part of being a virtual assistant in from like a marketing perspective?
Um, you Specifically for authors, I think it's that some marketing takes a while to really um catch on. So it's like a lot of consistency. And I think, sometimes, especially if you're a new author, you're like, okay, I'm not seeing results right away, but
Mhm.
it's about building that audience. And that can be a hard thing, I think, to convey to a new client, for instance. It's like, well, we have to post, every day. And
Mhm.
then and me, myself, like I said, I don't like being on video. And I know I have clients who just, they don't want to be on video, but at the same time, um, readers want to be able to connect with you. And I think, you know, showing your face on video helps them do that. So I think that's sometimes a challenge is just trying to convince clients of that. They Readers want to see your personality, that kind of thing.
So for you, for your authoring specifically, do you show yourself on video for your
So
author business? Or?
I have been challenging myself to do that. So I've been doing like TikTok lives, which I
Nice.
don't even know what I'm doing on them. Like I'm
Well,
just rambling and I'm like, I'm sure this is terrible, but people watch it, so I don't know. And you know, trying to make videos here and there, kind of just to show my personality, talk about the book. But, I do find it a challenge. But I also am like, well, I kind of understand it too. It's like I like to know the authors that I'm, reading. And that's what readers like. So, I think it's just challenging yourself to do it kind of thing.
hmm
Like I say, I do the lives and I don't know if I'm even doing it right. But
I
it's
mean,
social media, so you never know.
yeah, I'm sure you are. I used to do TikTok lives for a hot second, and I remember feeling that's actually why I started the podcast because I thought I much prefer recording it and doing something with it than having someone to talk to, right? Because I feel like also the
Right.
TikTok lives, I was like, I'm just talking to myself, and there are people that would
Yeah.
listen, and there's plenty of people that love to come and engage with you, but it's those hard times when no one joins, and you're like, I'm just talking to a wall.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure I'm doing this wrong. I don't know.
But I mean, kudos to you. That's challenging. And, in terms of waiting for things to stick, I think that's the biggest challenge for authors is particularly, who might be like yourself, who just don't enjoy doing the video aspects. It's hard to feel motivated to do it when you don't like doing it and you're not seeing results. So it would be
Yeah,
different if you saw results quickly, but you don't always.
yeah. It's all about, building your audience and, finding that audience. And it just takes time. So,
So how did you find your audience for the San Francisco connection? How did you go about finding your readers?
well, like I said, I'm in that Facebook group, so they have a lot of great, it's called 20 books to 50,000 or
Oh yeah, 20 books to
um
50K, right?
yeah, yeah. And so they have a lot of great videos in there about different ways to market. A lot of people were using TikTok, so I started on there, and I have maybe around like 2,000 followers, so it's starting to gain some traction. Um, and so kind of started there, and then I also, occasionally, will do some of those promo stacks, which I think help a lot, um, because you can reach like a larger audience than you already have. I also have a blog where I like focus on indie authors, so because I want to help promote other indie authors. So yeah.
Wow, you have a lot going on. I'm impressed. Yeah, that's all. You've got your VA work, you've got your authoring, you've got, of course, your own marketing. You have an infant that you're taking care of, and you're helping
Yeah, I
support.
have
You've
three
got a
kids
blog.
actually.
You have two kids.
I have three.
Three. Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's
my
very, very
daughter's the
cool.
youngest.
Um, I love that. I love to hear that. So definitely a lot going on and a blog to boot. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your secret to having time for it all?
Like I said, I think you just have to, well, I'm one of those people who I think I have like ADHD or something. I have a real hard time just like watching TV. I have to
Hmm.
like be doing something.
Yes.
So I think that helps a little bit.
I
Um,
That's funny. I'm the same way. It,
so
it drives my wife crazy. She cannot understand the concept of I can't focus on this TV show or this movie unless I'm doing something. And I know that's so weird, but I will stop paying attention to this TV show if I'm just sitting there. So it's kind of
no,
ironic.
totally. Yeah, I just can't. I can't sit there and watch. I don't know why. I
It's-
have the hardest time.
yes, and sitting still is a problem for me as well. As I mentioned prior to us have starting this conversation, I just
Yeah,
need to fidget. But no, I
yeah.
think that that's really cool, and you bring up a really unique perspective and a realistic perspective. I think there's so many authors that are like you and myself, where we have a lot going on, but we still have this passion for writing. We have this passion for helping indie authors and doing what we can for them. So I love that. I love to hear that. So for your blog, I just want to touch base on that a little bit. You mentioned you love supporting indie authors. Do you have specific genre indie authors that you like to support, or just indie authors in general?
No, I really like reading just about anything.
Nice.
So I encourage people to like send me their books, especially if they're on Kindle Unlimited because I have it. So,
Nice.
um, and yeah, I just love reading anything that I can get my hands on. So, and I just love supporting, you know, indie authors and just um, you know, giving them a review. If I make a post, I'll also, leave a review on Amazon, Goodreads, that kind of thing, because I know it's just so hard for us as authors to get reviews. Um, so,
It's challenging. It's,
um,
it's funny. I mean, then I think about my own behavior and I forget to review things all the time. It's not like I don't want to. It's just life's busy and you forget to take
yeah,
the time
yeah,
to.
definitely. No, I totally understand it. I feel like, before, especially before I became an author, I never really thought about like, oh, I love this book. Let me leave a review. I
Yeah.
never thought about it. But it's just, so hard for us to get reviews and to And then, it's such a big thing as far as getting other people to read it if it's reviewed.
Hmm.
So I like to do that. If I read something, an indie author that I really like, I'll leave a review, I'll post a blog, I'll put a video on my TikTok and just give it a little bit of exposure,
Yeah,
help where I can, I guess.
that's very, very cool. Yeah, it may feel minimal, but it's more than you think. Definitely that support, and it's appreciated, I'm sure, by all the authors. I do have a question. It's a little bit of a left turn in the conversation, but you mentioned that you are a big advocate of disabilities. And I would love to double click on that a little bit, just try to understand, your passion for advocacy for disabilities.
Yeah, so I have cerebral palsy, so I use a wheelchair.
Oh.
So been disabled since birth. And then my dad, he had glaucoma, and towards the last years of his life, he couldn't see at all. So
Mhm.
um, I'm I know a lot about disabilities because of those two things, I guess. And um, so that's why my characters, have like a disability or something. Kind of want to want to make it, a part of the story, but not like the whole story. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
it does make sense. And I think it's very cool because I think it's not that people don't care about or don't think about disabilities. I just think maybe they live in a world where they're not confronted by it. And so
yeah,
to not have stories or an understanding of those situations, I think it just doesn't lead to the colorful life that we should have. So I didn't have a chance to ask, do you have disability representation in your books? Do you plan to write that into your books at some point?
yeah. So like the father in my book, he has a limp because he was in an accident.
Hmm.
Um, so in a way, he has a disability, and um, I've gotten some criticism over the fact that the character has a hard time dealing with the change in his life. But I feel like people who get a disability later in life sometimes tend to have a hard time accepting, the limitations that they now have. So I kind of wanted to highlight that, because I think people have different experiences depending on when they, you know, start having a disability. And the thing about disabilities is like, you could not have one and then have one. And so I kind of wanted to highlight that a little.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in the second book, the 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 main character, the little boy, has diabetes and cerebral palsy. So, but and it's kind of a focus of the story, but you also get to see how it's just like a regular boy too. I kind of wanted to make the disability like a part of the characters, but not like the main focus of the story. Just a part of who they are, kind of thing. Because I think representation matters, and it's nice to see someone like yourself in a story.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I wanted to give that for other people who have disabilities, I guess.
Yeah, and this may or may not be true. I can't remember where I heard this. I was possibly on TikTok. Who knows? Content is
Yeah,
so common all over the place. But I think I remember someone pleading for it was someone with a disability on TikTok for a story or just advocating for a story where the disability is part of the story, but it's not overcome by magic or, you know, poof, it's gone because of some miracle or something. Like the reality of this fantasy or sci-fi situation, and this person has this disability and it doesn't go away. Because I think there's lots of
yeah,
examples of there's a disability at the beginning, for whatever reason, magic takes it away, or it's accounted for whatever magical thing. And I think they just were pleading for, can we just be realistic? Like they
right.
people with disabilities can still and do function as, humans and adults, and they do very well. It doesn't have to be fixed, quote unquote, by magic.
Right. No, I like
Logic.
that. Yeah.
So I don't feel comfortable writing that because I don't have very much experience with it. I also don't live close to people, or I'm not close with a lot of people that are that way. But I think that'd be a
Yeah.
really interesting story to write.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like that, because also you run into a lot of people who are like, oh, well, if you just, prayed hard enough or something like that, and then it can be really frustrating because you're like, I don't think that's gonna work, like, So, um, and I and you kind of want to tell them like, well, I'm just fine the way that I am, like I'm
Mhm.
not, wishing away or something. So. I
Yeah,
don't, and so that's kind of why I wanted my characters to just kind of be in the story. Like they're just people,
I
you
love
know.
that. I think that's very, very cool. Well, I mean, your book sounds fascinating. I transparently don't have tons of experience reading mystery. I have read them before. I spend most of my time in the fantasy and sci-fi space, but hearing about
Yeah,
your book, I want to read it. It sounds fascinating. So,
that's awesome. Yeah, actually, the publishing agency that I work for, our focus is fantasy and sci-fi. So
oh,
lately, I've
okay.
been reading a lot of those.
Very cool. Well, that's very good. Well, I know there's so many more things we could probably discuss. This is such a deep topic, but we are running a little bit short on time. So before we end here, where can people find more information about you and your books?
Yeah, so my blog is what do you want to read next? Dot blog, and so they can check it out there. I'm also, on all the social media channels. You just look up Kelly Allegretti. There's not that many of us. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, there's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Um, and would love to hear from anyone if they have any questions or anything like that.
very cool. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on the platform.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed the conversation a lot. All right, I hope you found that insightful and positive. Kelly, like I said, is just a very positive, sweet person. Her positivity is just infectious, and it helped me feel excited about my writing and just the catharsis that comes from writing for myself and in many different ways. Next week, I will be talking to Kim Boo York about the advantages and skill of discovery writing. This conversation is very close to my heart. I listened to a podcast interview with Kim Boo and Joanna Penn at the Creative Penn a few weeks ago. And the moment I heard her talking to Joanna Penn, I said, "Oh, I want to talk to Kim Boo because she is a discovery writer herself. She's written a book about discovery writing, which I read and enjoyed thoroughly. So if you're interested in understanding more about discovery writing or pantsing, maybe you are a pantser, maybe you're a plotter and you want to learn more about the way we think, you want to join for that conversation. It's very fun and very enlightening. So that's next week. If, of course, you'd like to join me on the podcast, head to thecasualauthor.com, fill out the pitch form, or you can email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com. Happy to have you there as well. Appreciate all your support and listening, and I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to talking to you next week.